All right. So welcome everybody. Very excited to have everyone here. It's the first time we've done this, so we're going to give it a whirl. I've already learned one thing. If you're going to do this, use Chrome. That seems to be the first side of how to successfully do this. So again, welcome to the Inside Access Control first live stream on YouTube. Ask Me Anything. Couple things before we kick this off. If you have any questions or want to talk about any subjects, please drop them inside the say something box that's over on the right on the chat. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. We're going to see how long on the topic side. Really don't have an agenda, if you would, on the amount of time that it's going to take to do this, but going to try to keep it somewhat upbeat and talk about the different topics that we have within the access control visitor management space. So thank you again for those of you that made the time to do this. I thought we'd kick it off by just introducing myself real quick and a little bit about Inside Access Control, specific around what the purpose of it is and what we're trying to do. For myself, I've been in the access control industry for about, I don't know, it's close to 15 years at this point, at different parts in different areas within the industry. Have somewhat of a point of view when it comes to how I think the marketplace and what the market's going to look like, and like to share that, and really want to create nothing more than a place where people can have a conversation. I don't necessarily think my way is the way that it's done, but I have a point of view, and I like to share that and love the interaction that people have. So intend to keep doing that. Really love the engagement that comes from everybody. Want to make sure that we continue to do that. So the content is what's the most important, the conversation around it. So please do. The Inside Access Control is really that platform. And I call it a platform because I want it to be a place where there can be a stage, if you would, for people to say their part of what they believe the industry is going to look like. To that point, we're going to be bringing on other voices into the arena, if you would, around the Inside Access Control. Recently, we did with the Get Security Done, the GSD talks that we're doing. It's a collaboration with a group of young professionals that really are looking to drive a conversation that is intended to spark what you need as a young professional in the space to be effective. And they'd like to see change happen in a good way. So encouraged by what they're doing. We have another 2 or 3 in the works right now for people to come on. So I encourage anybody that's interested to do it, just reach out. It's definitely something that I'd like to see people see as a place that they can go to have a conversation. So please treat it that way and think of it that way. So before this was done, I had somebody sent in a question, and I thought I'd start with that. Again, if you have any questions, ask it on the Say Something. I'm going to write, please ask questions. Let's do this overall. So cool. So first question that somebody came was that I subscribe to the newsletter, and I'm a big fan, so I appreciate that. Something I've been thinking about and discussing with my network is prospecting and new business development in the current climate. Thus far, I haven't come up with anything useful, and I'd love to see some thoughts on that in the coming issue that you might have. So put a little bit of thought to that and spent a little bit of time. If you saw a newsletter, I think it was 2 ago, we had a conversation around how I think sales has changed inevitably as we move forward. And I know those of you that are in the space, you know that. What I think is happening is, especially when you look at video and content creation, everybody's becoming an influencer. And I joke the PewDiePie that, you're part salesperson, part him now. And what I meant by that was that basically, if you can't get from an industry that's typically gone to where you would go meet somebody and have a conversation to now having to be sitting in your house, like in the office here, as I am, and trying to figure out how to prospect and add value. My belief is you should start to think of yourself as an influencer. Maybe not in the negative way that some of the influencer type feel is, but in the way of the ability to influence and utilize the tools. So I don't think you need fancy headphones and speakers and the rest of it to do it. But I do think that if you start to think of yourself as a content creator, I think you'd start to create some value for people in your marketplace. Now, if you're an outside salesperson that's calling on, say, the dealer network or the end users, my belief is that they're having probably some of the same concerns that you have. So figuring out ways to work with them to create content that they can use in the marketplace and move it forward, or in collaboration of them, I think it is. So whether that's doing a podcast or creating a video, it could be holding webinars, whatever it might be, sort of going out of your comfort zone. And even if one person shows up, I think it would be added value for you because it's one more person. And what I've noticed in doing these things is that a lot of it comes down to consistency. Luckily, in January, I decided, through the support of my wife, that it'd be a good idea for us to get microphones and do the rest, because I was trying to figure out what am I going to go do. And for those of you that have worked with me in the past, I like to talk and have a point of view. So I was just going to start capturing that. It started off with the camera on my computer and a headset. And it turned into went and bought these lights that I have here, and then this microphone. And it wasn't even terribly too expensive, but you don't need all of that stuff. My suggestion would be is just to start small. And I don't know, everyone typically, when I was an outside salesperson, I had a favorite dealer that I worked with, and that was very comfortable that I could go to and say, I want to try something. And in a lot of ways, they look at you as an extension of them. So they're usually very open to new ideas. So I would do that, and I would see if you could create that content for them. The other thing that I would do in my recommendation is I would challenge back up into your organization itself. They're also not used to doing this. They're used to making, a lot of times, if you look at our industry, our marketing departments and content creators are really product marketers and content creators. If you think I'm crazy for saying that, I would suggest you look at anything that most of them produce, and you'll see that it talks about how their door is more hingier than the other person, or they have a blue blinkier light than the other person. Now, some companies are getting better at that. I'm seeing a lot. I'll give credit to people like Genetec and OpenPath and Brevo. They've done a nice job of doing content and seemed to shift quickly. PDK was another company that's done it well. And Traction Guest is another one from the visitor management. So they're creating content now that you can utilize, that their sales force can take out to the market, and then their dealer network can do it. If you work for a company that's not doing that, I would challenge back up and ask and tell that you need some help when it comes to that. And again, I don't think it necessarily has to be crazy. Now, if you're in a leadership position at one of those companies and you're not comfortable doing it yourself, or you don't understand it, my suggestion would be is to empower your people to go do that. I don't necessarily think you maybe need to go out and be the best creator of TikTok for access control. But when it comes to videos or it comes to content, I think there's probably, I don't know, I'm going to guess, depending on the size of the company, a percentage, pick the number, that works for you, that knows how to do that or has it. There's a gentleman that works with Genetec that's doing that currently right now. I've seen a couple of video companies where people are doing some unboxing type stuff to create good content. There's a lot of end users that I've noticed that would like to have conversations around this. So I don't think it's terribly too hard. The hardest part, in my opinion, is actually just getting up and doing it. So I would suggest that you just start doing, and I would suggest that you even challenge some of your bosses or the marketing departments to jump in and do it with them. So that's my suggestions real quick on the sales side. I'd recommend, happy to dive in more, and I think I'm going to continue on with another newsletter that's going to talk about that. Had a question come through that says, do you see the channel model of ACS manufacturers changing in X years, or should the model change to accommodate a more IT-centric end-user community, which is now demanding a more direct relationship? Interesting. So there's a lot in that. The answer, I would say, is yes to a lot of it. Now, when it comes to the key thing, I think, of that statement that is said is It's a direct relationship. My answer on a direct would be it depends. So let's break this down a little bit. I think that the models of access control are rapidly changing currently now, 100%. I think you have almost an interesting paradigm happening where, it looks like things are fine. Think of it like as a riptide in a lot of ways. Business is good. You maybe have been growing like 8%, 10%, looks great. Underneath, though, it's a complete just shift happening. And if you don't dig deep and have somebody's looking at the deeper, I think in the end, you're going to get caught. And I think it goes beyond just the IT-centric side of it. And I think it comes down to a bunch of things. Like, I think historically, I'll give you this one. I think historically, our industry as itself has been focused on different stakeholders than the current ones that are starting to come out. For instance, historically, we've been focused on the admin and the installer. We've never really had a relationship with the end user, the person, the card-carrying person that's there. We now do. We especially as they move into more mobile, and especially now as health starts to impact our business, there is a new relationship and a new stakeholder. But our industry hasn't historically, I don't care how customer-centric they said they've been, the customer centricity on their part has historically been the administrator, the integrator, and the distributor. And now you have this end user that is interacting with our products, and they come with a complete new preconceived notion of how things should work. And I believe, and I've talked about this in the fact that they're probably a little bit farther ahead than we are as an industry of where they think things are. Like, I don't think the mainstream customer base is having a conversation where they think mobile is going to be a thing. And that's because I think they're on mobile right now, and it's an expectation that we're already there, and we're not. So because you have a different customer on that side, I think the channels open up of what it might look like. Now, if that's selling direct, maybe in some cases, like maybe it's some of the software pieces, right? And there's plenty of models on the IT side. When you talk about IT centricity, there's on the IT side where this makes sense. Like Salesforce does this all day long, where they sell direct, they sell through a channel. There's people that configure. There's people that build products on top of their products. I think you're going to start to see it move in that direction a little bit in our industry like that. Now, what I think is going to be a bit different on that side is I think access control is actually going to soon become a part of a much larger operating system of a building, which will then shift. So our industry as itself may become a feature of a much larger value proposition. I think it's going to be. You're seeing some of that. A great example I'll give you is the multifamily space, which I've talked about. A company that's doing that I'll talk about is HQO, for instance. They came out with an operating system for buildings. That's exactly what that is. It takes tenant experience, utility management, access control, all of it, puts it up under one application, and access control becomes a feature of it. So now if you think about it, if I'm making a buying decision based off the software, how is access control being sold to them? Now, there's a hardware component that I always hear about, and I agree. And I think there always will be a place for that hardware to have to be installed and sold through, but it doesn't mean that the software has to be sold with it. And it doesn't mean that more of the software components. So maybe outside of configuration, because if you're really being honest, our industry has created software that is actually configuration software. There's very few people that have created software that goes deep enough within a vertical that I would say that product is built for that vertical. It's usually like majority of it's broad, and it's not built specifically for it, but you're starting to see people create specific products for those verticals, and it opens up a whole new opportunity. So my answer altogether is there will be some new. Some of it will stay old and stay the same. But over time, I do believe the buying habits and the way we sell, the way we build products and what we do will change 100%. So great question. Okay. Thank you. Next question was one thing I've been using to make content is, thank you. Thanks, Thomas. You've been using the iOS feature screen record. Absolutely. It's a great way to create content. It's nice and easy. You can do it right off your phone. The other thing I would tell you is they make a product such as this that's nice and easy. It's a microphone that clips into the bottom of your phone itself. and you can start recording, and it sounds really good. So super highly recommend that. If we're talking about engaging customers, Jason wrote, thank you, Jason. Every end user can call. There you go. What your point that I'll take on that is two things. HQO and Rise are a good example of people that are creating end users. I do think we're about to jump into an area where the definition of access control and what that looks like is going to change rapidly. There'll be different expectations. The customer base is going to do stuff. What I worry about with our industry is how traditional access control companies in our space are going to keep up with the demands that are going to be more customer centric and not necessarily as much security centric. There's corner cases that are going to be developed. And what it's going to do is I think it's going to start to pinch the ability to innovate, and you're going to be forced to iterate. So how you balance those things, I think, is going to become very, very important. And definitely, as I look at that criteria that I created of what I think is going to need to be done to create a sense of who's going to be leading down the road, those that are able to have some hard decisions right now to say no and have discipline in product management and set aside the proper amount of time in order, or in resources in order to do proper development, are the ones that are going to continue to keep up. What I hope happens is I think our industry is going to need to stop being generalists in a lot of ways. Now, on the high security side, I think we can get away from some of that because I do think there'll be a market for that high security. But when it gets into some of these more mainstream areas, I think the generalist side of it's going to be really tough, and specializing and really figuring out those areas of which you go deep a mile versus a mile broad is going to differentiate. So again, I bring up the multifamily space, like Rise is a good example. We just did a podcast with them and they'll be on soon. What I think they're doing that is nice. Carson Living is another one on that end. Stratus is another one. You got a bunch of companies, Homebase. They are very, very deep in that marketplace, and they are driving the specifications that are happening. And I would recommend that people take a look at that and figure out how you can make your software customizable enough and modular enough that you can take after it. I would tell you to, if you go deep in some areas, it doesn't mean that you can't go broad in others. And I think that's the problem too, is that we want to take and be very binary in this. I think you can have multiple personalities, and I think it's okay. I think it's fair to do that. So my recommendation is to figure out how to do that. I think the trick here is it's going to be almost impossible to do that while with the same resources. I think you're going to have to create what we've been calling innovation engines, figuring out the spaces where this can happen and start to do that. So shifting gears just a little bit, keep the questions coming in. I appreciate Jason and OK and Travis. Travis mentions Kill Procs. Yeah, it's one of the rallying cries. Unfortunately, I've got an entire big box back here of Kill Procs pins and that we're going to bring to IC West. I got to figure out what to do with. But really what that is if I could speak to that just a little bit, because I think it's important. On the Kill Procs side, it's call it a hashtag if you want to, but the whole idea around it was this idea that as an industry, we have these value statements that talk about keeping places safe. But yet I don't see the appetite in a lot of cases to make a lot of changes. And people overuse, in my opinion, the proc side of this in applications that we all know aren't necessarily secure enough for that product. Now, I think there are applications for it. And I think there's places where it does have a place, but overarching into it, I think is actually a mistake that our industry has. I think we don't spend enough time leading. I think we spend too much time looking in the past when it comes to that. And I would love to see us move on. I think procs is the cigarettes of our industry. And I think it's upon us as leaders in the industry to drive a conversation and change the way that we use that product and really differentiate ourselves. Again, I think we can use it, but I would definitely not use it as much as we typically do now. And I would start to take a look at everything else. Question is, what do I think about the OSDP verified program by SIA that just launched? Seems like a layer of cost and process that the industry doesn't need. Not sure. Okay. Here are my thoughts on it. So positives and negatives, just like in anything. I'm positive on the fact that there is something being done on a purpose of what OSDP was being generated. It's like, utopia is that there's a standard that everybody uses. The problem is that that is utopia, and I don't see us getting to that point, but it's a start. My belief and what I would like is to see the conversation around OSDP happen, good and bad. You don't like it, you like it, whatever it is. I don't think there's enough of that conversation that goes on. What happens is we create these camps. Like, our industry loves camps. You've got the people that are like, well, they're all for OSDP, and there's the people that are against OSDP, and they don't talk. The group of OSDP gets together and they do press releases and they talk about it, but they don't bridge out a lot, in my opinion, to the non-OSDP people. And the non-OSDP people don't bridge enough and go into it. They want to go create their own or do whatever they want to do. I don't know. But I think there's an opportunity to have a much larger dialogue. And maybe that's something that we'll do on that end. I also think there's a purpose that, there's a belief that people have that it's more secure. It could be. I'm not arguing whether it is or it isn't. That's not what I want to do. They think it'll make things easier. It'll drive down costs. A lot of really, really positive things. I believe it gets lost in the conversation around what it is and what it's trying to, the purpose of what it's having. And then also sometimes the people that get involved, we create, our friends get involved, and it's not as open and inclusive. So I think it should. Now, specific on the verified program by SIA on it, I mean, again, I'm not an expert enough into what they're asking for. I think, and just the little bit that I looked at it, I could tell by the question you're asking if it seems like a layer of cost and process that's not needed. I'm going to guess you're not for it. And I can't speak to whether it actually is or it isn't. My suggestion on it is that it was done for a purpose of having, from what I think, I wasn't in the meetings, but I would guess that people were doing this because two parts is there's an opportunity to differentiate people, just like on the Bluetooth side of things, to make sure that it's done right so that everyone says it can't, but then you find there's different ways that are done and it's not authentic enough. So when you're making buying decisions, that you can say your product is certified versus other people, right? The other side of it is there is an opportunity, rightfully so, that people saw that they can charge money for something and make revenue. I think that's fair, and I think that's why people did it. So I think there's a place for it. I'm sure it's not perfect. My recommendation would be to engage in it and start a conversation. I'll give you this, whoever, I'm not 100% sure who it is, reach out to me if you want to write an article about why you don't think it's good and what it should be. I'm happy to take it and we'll put it out for you. And hopefully maybe that'll spark the conversation. All right, hopefully that answers that one on that side. I guess we're coming up on 23 minutes. I'm going to keep this to 30 just to keep people, again, I appreciate everyone that's joined, especially people that have asked questions. Thank you. A couple of places and comments that I wanted to bring up as well is I'm going to start to dive into, there's a question that came out that was sent to me on a text message, which was somebody asked it. It's really an interesting question. It's one of those big questions, right? The question was what does safety really mean? And how can we, the individuals who dream and build and innovate products and solutions, software and hardware, how can we build a more inclusive world where spaces aren't just secure, but places are truly safe? Super big question, not an easy answer at all. But what I like about it is it's asking questions that go beyond the value statements that we have. And it's actually asking for definitions to happen, and it's actually asking for action plans to be put into place. And to really start to think about, what does safety mean? And how do we create safe spaces? That's what our industry is for. We have a ton of value statements around that. It's not about, like OSDP or just about, is it Bluetooth, or a lot of the things that we as technical tacticians, if you would, like to debate and talk about and have holy wars over, but without losing sight over how do we create safe spaces? Because that's what I think is happening. as well as if those of you that listen to the podcast I just did with Bridget, what I liked, there's a lot I liked in there, but one of the things that I liked about it was we had a conversation around, as our industry goes more mainstream and people start to take our product and put it in their hand and they take it home and they do a lot more with it and they interact with it more. We have a responsibility, I believe, of defining and helping create those safe spaces. But if we don't have really a point of view on it, I think it's going to be hard for us to do that, because all we're going to then do is just build products. And I think we need to build solutions, and we need to really have those conversations and have point of views and start to drive the conversation. Because if we don't, I have a feeling other people will, especially as it goes more mainstream. And what we're having right now is we're having people come in from outside our industry that are defining that. And it's hard for us to find a space once they come in. I'll give you a great example. A note that I put on here of an article I want to write soon is, how do we prevent the delivery situation from happening to us again? Because if we're being honest, delivery happened to our industry. These unmanned deliveries, right? Where people come in, they create experiences, products get, Amazon, for instance, Amazon Business, FedEx, the rest of it. Our industry got caught and we're surprised by that. Somebody's going to figure out safe schools. Somebody's going to figure out safe buildings. You've got a whole bunch of people currently now that I'm welcoming with open arms into the industry around health spaces, because we haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about it. And if we just believe that we're going to be able to just say, hey, we're the locked people and the access control people, and we're able to define safety now as it means with health, I think we're kidding ourselves. And I think we're actually getting caught in a little bit of way around that right now. That's why you see the rush with like fever cameras. I mean, if you want to see, I joked, I posted something on LinkedIn, is for those of you who are familiar with the butt fumble for the New Jersey Nets, that is the equivalent to what's happening with the fever cameras. And I'll give IPVM credit that John and those guys are doing a great job of digging into the fever cameras. I'm not going to comment on whether I think everything that happens over there, and especially with me, is the right thing. But this I'll give them credit for, in the fact that they are actively trying to bring a level of conversation around fever cameras, because and thermal cameras and the rest of them, because it's being injected into the access control space. And we're like, anybody need a hammer? I got a hammer. And a problem is that we bring too many hammers to the party. And I'd like us to start to have that conversation. So I'm going to dig in more into actually what safety means and how we can use our platforms to empower individuals to empathize better and contribute, which is, I know it sounds very woo-woo, but I actually think the woo-woo-ness has to happen a bit more into our industry, because as OK just put on here, that it's refreshing to get some optimism and modernization. I mean, I personally, I love the industry. I am an access control nerd. I think people like myself who like to have these conversations could sometimes paint it as people that are bitching and moaning about the industry, and it's not. It's just sort of friction and frustration and desire for it to be more modern and more optimized. And it's not picking on certain companies that don't. Every industry has had companies that come and they go, and that's okay. I'd love to see everybody win, but my fear is that if we don't open up and start leading and having point of views, whether it's Amazon, Google, Apple, new well-funded startup, and people within our industry, I think that map of who leads is going to shift, and it's going to shift pretty quick, and we're starting to see some of it. And I think it's encouraging, and I think we need to keep doing that. I think we're going to need to have different channel approaches. I think we're going to have to get comfortable with the woo-woo. I think there's going to need to be more emotional intelligence training in our industry itself. I need it. You need it. We all need it. Because I think sometimes that gets in the way, a lot of times, into some of the decisions that we make when we're building products or picking channels or having just open dialogue and conversation. I'm really excited about seeing what's going on with SIA and ASIS and ESA and PSA and these associations. I'd love to see them all kind of come together, because I think who we serve there has to change too. Like we serve, I think, too much on the manufacturing side there and not enough those new end users. Like, I'm curious, like, where's the customer's voice that comes in there? So that's interesting to me. and places that I'd like to dig in a little bit more on that side. I think there'll be some more consolidation and a lot more companies. Like, so what does that do to our industry as a whole? New leaders stepping up and really valuing, you'll hear me talk about valuing talent over tenure. This isn't an attack on ageism. I mean, I'm not a young guy in this space anymore. It's not an attack on certain colors or races, and that it's not. It's a recognition that new ideas and new voices into our marketplace, it's not just based off of how long you've been in the industry anymore. I can show you 100 examples of how that's true. And I'm excited and I'm encouraged about that. So we're going to continue to create those conversations. Hi, June, I appreciate you putting the post that Bridget said, because people have to trust what we sell. People have to feel connected to it because they're literally using it to connect. 100%. I think Bridget nailed that in the last podcast. And that's the part that we miss. I mean, if you're working on ADA stuff and you don't have anybody that is a representation of that product when you're building it, I think you're doing it wrong. If we don't have young, old, black, brown, whatever, white, everybody involved in those conversations, I think we're doing it wrong. And that's all I want to see. So it's not an attack of like one being better than the other. I think what this is it's an opportunity more than anything else. I mean, we've got the world's biggest excuse in our industry right now. Sorry, I'm not trying to get preachy, but we've got the world's biggest excuse in our industry right now to make a change. And I know there's a bunch of people that are going to do that. I'm encouraged by it. I'm seeing it. I'm honored to have the opportunity to have a lot of these conversations. Travis wrote on here, as manufacturers, we need to help our customers better understand how to reach the customer. Our customers are very engineering and techie centric, but their customers have moved on. You're spot on. That's why it's like, who are those customers? That's why I'm encouraged. And you saw that came out with Inside Visitor Management. The reason for it is that is a group of people that are solving a problem for the customer's customer right now. And they are asking a lot of the right questions. Now, I don't know if all of those companies are going to win. I don't know if they'll be around and they're going to do it. But what I can tell you is I'm encouraged by the dialogue that I'm having with them, because they are helping change. If you think about it, our customers' customers have gotten to know the industry that we love based off of a black reader on the wall and a white card. They also don't even call this access control. Somebody, I think it was Chad over at LockDoc, said they call this thing card access, not access control, right? So we're not even in touch with the customer's customer, what they're calling it. But a lot of the visitor management companies are. And I think that what they've created is a really rich interface, whether it's on an iPad or these pre-registration ones that are coming out now, which are very dynamic. They're engaging with the customer. They're building brand. They're building awareness. The thing that I'm most encouraged by is they have data on demand, on real time on the phone of how people are engaging with their product. When a lot of the access control companies that we all have worked at or know, the only data that we have in a lot of times is no data for people that old legacy systems, or we have data based off of the admin. The older companies that are in our space that have encouraged the cloud-based adoption of the architecture and have those relationships with the end users, they're now getting data rich because they're able to respond and see how people are using their systems. I don't know, if I didn't have that before, I had to go off of what the admin's telling me. In a lot of cases, what the admin's telling me is a card number and a facility code. I don't even know who the person is. So I think what we're starting to need to go see is that customer centricity of what's going on. I would encourage you to think about that on that end. I'm going to close up soon here. We're already like 4 minutes ahead of time. Okay, you asked me, what are the bats about behind me? That was actually a wedding gift for my brother for being in this wedding. My son's the smaller bat. I'm the bigger bat. And he gave those to us as gifts. We did the bachelor party in Louisville, so he created those. So I put those in the back. I like to say that I didn't play baseball. I'm a fan of the Nats, being in the DC area. So yeah. All right. Well, I think for the first one, I'll call this a success. I appreciate the engagement. Don't apologize for being curious. I encourage it. So please ask them those questions. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to open this up actually to people that want to participate in the conversation. My hope is that if we keep doing these, they'll build like everything else. I think it's a great platform to use. If anyone can encourage LinkedIn Live to open it up to me, I'd love to do this in their platform, but they haven't, so we'll do it here. Keep the conversation coming. Thank you for those of you that listened to what today's newsletter was in the YouTube video that we did with Bridget. It's about diversity, inclusion, and the atmosphere, what's going on. It is definitely not an attack on the industry in any way. I've received great feedback. I've received critical feedback in some cases. I've told people that this is the kind of day where I feel like I'm part of a tribe, but then I feel like the loneliest man on the earth because the feedback that comes through, but I'm encouraged by all of it. I ask for a conversation. I'll take the good and the bad. And what I hope is that's a call to action to have the conversation, because I know a lot of people in our industry want to see these things evolve. I don't care if it's technically, societally, culturally, whatever it might be. I'm encouraged by it. I think all parts, white, black, brown, green, whatever, everybody needs to want to see this move forward. So I'm encouraged to do it. So thank you all. Appreciate you spending 30 some minutes of your time with me to do this. And I look forward to having more of these conversations. So thank you very much.